In the last few episodes, Haleemah and ET worked to make sense of Nicole's method. They had previously thought of two ways of describing her equation in the cobblestone context. One method used rows, and the other used columns. Recall, in the previous lesson, Haleemah and ET used columns to describe Amir's method. Explaining Amir's method, Haleemah and ET said that the first number represented the size number and the number of stones in a column. Then, the second number was multiplied by the first because it represented the groups or columns of those stones. This was the same for the first and the last sections, and part of the middle section. To account for the remaining column in the middle section, this method adds the number of stones in that column. To be consistent across methods, Haleemah and ET are going to think of Nicole's method using columns. This means that the X will represent the size number and the number of stones in a column, and multiplication is going to represent groups of columns of those stones. In this episode, Haleemah and ET will compare Nicole and Amir's method for finding the total number of gray stones from an unknown size number. They will start working towards this goal by looking at a size 3 cobblestone pattern.
So the 3 times 3, it's pretty much the same thing as 3 squared, because you're just multiplying 3 times itself.
Yes. I also noticed that something different is in Nicole's equation, she does 3 times 4, but in Amir's equation, he does 3 times 3 plus 3.
Yeah. And something else I noticed is that they each equal the same thing. They each equal 30.
And I'm just going to do this for reference real quick. I'm going to circle the columns for Nicole's equation. So something else I noticed is that Amir chooses to do a different color to represent the +3, while Nicole keeps all of hers in the same color because she multiplies the full 3 times 4.
Thus far, Haleemah and ET have noticed that 3 times 3 is the same thing as 3 to the second, and they've noticed that both arithmetic equations get you 30. Then, ET pointed out a difference between the two methods. Where Amir had 3 times 3 plus 3, Nicole had 3 times 4. This difference was even reflected in their drawings. Amir's had 2 colors, but Nicole's did not. Next, Haleemah and ET are going to look at the general equations of Amir and Nicole and think about equality.
So here's Amir's equation for finding the total number of gray squares. And then right above it was how he used that equation to find the total number of gray squares in size 3. And then here's Nicole's equation for finding the total number of gray squares, and then her arithmetic. So what we're going to do is we're going to take the left side of Amir's equation and set it equal to the left side of Nicole's equation. Why do you think I can do that?
Because you
no,
go.
No,
Sorry.
you go.
Go ahead, Haleemah.
Because the equations are very similar and they both equal the same thing.
They both equal the same thing. What do they both equal?
30.
Ah, okay.
Haleemah and ET have made some great observations. Now, Haleemah and ET are going to move on to the generalized algebra expressions, and they're going to try and set them equal to each other. They both have the same output, after all. Haleemah and ET are going to compare the left and the right side of the equal sign and think about what parts are equal and why. Let's see what Haleemah and ET notice about these expressions.
I noticed that x times x and x squared are similar. because x squared is x times x, and x times x is on the left side of the equal sign. So I know those are both equal.
Yeah. I also know that the plus x and then the x times x plus 1, those are equal to this part. And this.
And I see the same thing that I had seen earlier with the x times x and the x squared.
Okay, I love your color coding.
I like the color coding too. It helps us to see which part Haleemah and ET think are equivalent. In pink, ET has the x times x and the x to the second. He said that those are the same because x to the second just means x times itself 2 times. What about the middle parts, underlined in black? Haleemah said she knows they are equivalent. But why? Haleemah and ET are going to explore why these two expressions are equal. To do so, we need to remember how Amir and Nicole were seeing their patterns. Remember, Amir had circled all but one of his columns in the middle section in a single color, and the remaining misfit column in a different color. For Nicole's method, on the other hand, Haleemah and ET circled all of the columns in the same color. Using these drawings, Haleemah and ET are going to try and think about why these expressions are equal.
Okay, so the 6 in my drawing represents that there are 6 columns, and then the 5 represents that there are 5 gray stones in each column.
So can you tell us about all the things that you wrote there, ET?
So in purple, I circled 5 columns, and in green is a spare column. And the first 5 in my equation, it represents the 5 tiles in one column. That's what the arrow is pointing to. And the second 5, it represents all 5 columns in purple. And the last 5 represents 5 tiles in the last spare column. And for more clarification, if you didn't understand, I wrote some stuff at the bottom.
So what's alike and what's different between what Haleemah did and what ET did? Are these, what represents, so ET is representing what x times x plus x means, and Haleemah was representing what x times x plus 1 means for size 5. What's alike and what's different here?
Well, something that's different is the x plus 1. That's very hard to explain. So it's really hard to interpret that in Haleemah's drawing or in my drawing.
ET's right. This is hard. But that's okay. In the next episode, Haleemah and ET will make a final attempt at explaining these two equations. First, let's notice some of the similarities. Both of these equations have the same meaning for the first x or the first 5. They represent the number of stones in a column of an unknown size numbered cobblestone pattern. From there, the methods are a bit different. Nicole multiplied the number of stones in a column by an x plus 1 or a 6 because it represented the number of columns or groups of stones. This captured all of the gray stones in the middle section. Amir, on the other hand, multiplied by an x or a 5, again because it represented a certain number of columns or groups of stones, but it didn't account for the last column. To capture the entire middle section, Amir added the extra column of stones by adding the number of stones in the leftover column. In the next episode, Haleemah and ET take their thinking about Nicole's method one more step by thinking about what the +1 in x times x plus 1 means.